Silly season drama is in full swing as Williams is ready to replace Logan. Sergio Perez could ironically save Daniel's F1 career, and Ferrari is confident it can get back to winning ways. Soon, do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Logan Sargeant has insisted he will fight to the end, as speculation over his Formula One seat with Williams persists. The American driver has failed to cement his place at the Grove-based outfit, with an incident-packed rookie season overshadowing his infrequent showings of raw pace. His current campaign has been far from eye-catching, with a best finish of 14th before last weekend's British Grand Prix, where he narrowly missed out on points in 11th. All the while, teammate Alex Albon has consistently been knocking on the door of the top 10, picking up 4 points along the way. But Sargeant has been hamstrung by a lack of equal parts to Albon, instead running a toned-down spec of car for much of the opening part of the year, whilst he was benched to allow the Thai Briton to compete at the Australian Grand Prix after the former Red Bull driver crashed in practice with no spare chassis available. Yet, despite the mitigating factors, Sargeant's form has come under intense scrutiny, and with Williams being high up the list of potential landing points for outgoing Ferrari driver Carlos Sainz, his place in F1 is coming into question. "I've had noise for I don't even know how long from every single direction," said Sargeant. "At the end of the day, I show up to these weekends and I do my absolute best every single time for everyone in the team who is working hard. I'm also here for myself, you know. I want to prove to myself that I can keep improving, keep showing that I can do it. In my head, I know the true facts, and I know that I've been doing a good job this season with what I've had, and that's what matters most to me." Team principal James Vowles had ruled out a mid-season swap earlier in the year, but the suggestion that Sargeant could make way before Abu Dhabi has returned in recent weeks. Asked if he felt that would be harsh, Sargeant replied, "I think considering it's taken so long to get 2 equal cars, it is hard to get a clear read on how things are going. What I know is I'm happy with the way I'm driving, and I couldn't say that last year, and I can this year." Vowles, who conceded it would be difficult to rebuild his driver's confidence after the Melbourne benching, added to Sargeant's pressure at the British Grand Prix weekend by implying he would have to justify his place with the team. "Like I said, the most important thing is I know I've been doing a good job," Sargeant responded. "I know I've been driving well with what I've had over the course of the season. By looks in Suzuka, I'm really proud of the way I've showed up and, kept trying to deliver even when I don't always have the car to deliver. I'm a fighter. I'm going to fight no matter what the situation is. I'm going to fight to the end." As the Red Bull driver speculation continues, it is Sergio Perez's disastrous run of results that could save Daniel Ricciardo's F1 career. Back on the grid with Red Bull's junior team, VCARB, Helmut Marko has confirmed Red Bull had hoped Ricciardo could put pressure on Perez and thus take the Red Bull seat for the 2025 championship. Instead, the Honey Badger has toiled in a season in which he's been under pressure for Yuki Tsunoda, which led to Red Bull handing Perez a new 2-year extension for 2025. That, though, is now under threat with Perez's current form, as such that the media understands there's a clause in his contract that allows Red Bull to swap drivers in the summer break. That clause is said to be his points difference to Max Verstappen, and if it's more than 100 after the Belgian Grand Prix, Perez could be demoted. Today, his deficit is 137 points, and he has just 2 races in which to turn that around. There is, however, a third player in Lawson who tested the RB20 at Silverstone on Thursday. Red Bull haven't released any information about the Kiwi's run, but it could be what determines who's in the Red Bull alongside Verstappen come August's Dutch Grand Prix. Mark Priestley, a former McLaren mechanic, reckons as the saga plays out, it could be Lawson in the RB20, Ricciardo in the VCARB, and Perez on the sidelines. It was another weekend to absolutely forget for Checo, coming on the back of a couple of weekends to forget in all honesty, he told his YouTube channel. And the talk in the paddock this weekend has been increasingly around the likelihood of Sergio Perez being replaced even before this season is out. He has only just signed a contract extension, but undoubtedly there will be clauses in that contract that are performance-related, which will give Red Bull the opportunity to switch their drivers around. Christian Horner always talks about all of the drivers, both at Red Bull and RB, being on a generic Red Bull contract, and they can be moved around, shuffled in terms of where they're placed in the Red Bull program. He added, "The talk up until now has been about Lawson replacing Daniel Ricciardo at VCARB. That seems like a fair, likely scenario. It makes sense given the results, given what the team is there to do, which is to feed the main team." I think we can all safely say Ricciardo is not likely to be the replacement for the Red Bull main team in the future. He's not a young driver coming through. Is Lawson a future Max Verstappen or Sebastian Vettel? We don't know. We've seen him in a handful of races when he replaced Ricciardo last year, but actually Red Bull need to get a better assessment on him. He's much more likely to have the potential to be a future champion than the likes of Ricciardo. So all the talk has been, will Lawson end up in the V-carb in the seat of Ricciardo? But the irony now is because of Checo's disastrous run of results, it could actually be Checo who actually saves Ricciardo's F1 career, at least for a little bit longer. Because now there is talk that Lawson could replace Checo, going straight into the main team as quickly as the summer break if Checo can't change his fortunes very quickly, and if Lawson proves to be a decent driver in that car and gives a good impression in the test. So it could be that Ricciardo lives to fight another day, and it could be Checo who is the first of those drivers to fall. After a disappointing start to its 2024 season, Alpine has continued to evolve its engineering structure after installing David Sanchez as executive technical director earlier this year. Sanchez, who had left McLaren only 3 months after starting at the British squad in January, had been picked up by Alpine to lead a new three-pronged technical structure set out by team principal Bruno Famin. This followed the resignations of Matt Harmon and Dirk de Beer, as the A524 produced for this season had started off uncompetitive and overweight. Things had since improved through the reorganization to a triad of technical directors, where Joe Burnell stepped up to be the engineering lead, David Weeder leading aerodynamics, and Ciaran Pilbeam headed up performance. With Sanchez having become available, the 3 technical directors now report to him, and the Frenchman feeds into Famin. Although bringing a new technical leader in weeks after a reorganization might suggest the arrival of more vast changes, Sanchez has stated that he is largely happy with the team he encountered upon joining Alpine. Skip. They are very good. Everything needed to make a competitive car is there, so I was very pleased when I joined, he revealed at Silverstone, conducting his first car presentation session for Alpine. Coming from outside, there was obviously a few things I tended to have my own opinion. There was a plan in place. We reviewed the plan, we adjusted a few things. For sure, the car needs a big push on upgrades. We are working on it, and it's going pretty well for now. This structure is becoming more and more the norm. There are big teams, so you need a lot of structure, and for sure at the moment it seems to be working. We saw last year that McLaren was able to make big steps in season. Adding to that, Sanchez says that the team is starting to understand its A524 more, noting the concerted effort to drop weight as a key factor. It was suggested that the car was bordering on 10 kilo in overweight, but mass had been taken out over the opening races to ensure it became more competitive. Alpine scored its first point of the season in Miami, and then added further scores in the races between and including Monaco and Austria, 2 of them double points finishes. The team hasn't managed to finish any higher than 9th, but its recent performance has generally trended towards improvement. Sanchez says that the car now simply needs upgrades. The focus on weight reduction has largely taken performance-driven updates out of the question for the time being. We are learning more about the car, and every race we are trying to squeeze more out of it. That's been a good trend in the last few races, and there's been a lot of learning to develop upgrades, and we should get new parts coming around the summer break, Sanchez said. There's been a large chunk of weight taken out of the car that cannot be underestimated, and then on the chassis side a lot, on the setup side, getting the drivers comfortable with the balance, and trying to get every little bit out of the car. Some of the upgrades were in the pipelines. Now we have a lot more coming up, plenty of ideas, and now it's trying to pedal as fast as we can. I think it's a bit of a lack of development. We just need more downforce. We need a bit more of everything, especially downforce. Obviously, the easy way to get downforce is to get the car running lower, but doing that without inducing problems. It's one of the limitations, but I think everyone is fighting it. Running the car lower is the easy way to get downforce. And there's a plank. There are some regulations on the skates we need to be careful. But development-wise, I think the direction is very clear at the moment. Along with the focus on catching up in the development stakes, and none too late given that the team has been eclipsed by Haas in the battle for 7th in the Constructors' Championship, Alpine has captured further signings. 2 of them are Red Bull recruits. Michael Broadhurst has joined to become chief aerodynamicist, while Vin Danani was installed as head of vehicle performance. In the meantime, Jacopo Fantoni has left Ferrari to become deputy chief engineer, the trio adding know-how from other front-running teams. Although Sanchez is prioritizing development in 2024, hoping the team can arrive after the summer break in a similar position to which McLaren managed last year with its heady upgrade progress, he has already identified areas to pursue for 2025, the last year of this current rule set. I think for now we're developing around the weaknesses. This year in season, it's a lot about aerodynamics, and for next year's car, when we review the hardware, we try and focus on fundamentally changing a few aspects of the car, and that should be another step forward, he explained. For next year, there will be conceptual changes. Again, we're talking about suspension mostly. For this year, we're shifting a bit focus on aerodynamics. I wouldn't say it's going to be big concept changes because when you look at the car, it will look similar, but when you look at the aerodynamic characteristics, they will tend to be, some of them different, some of them just more powerful for performance. The story of Formula One's development war in 2024 has been very much about whether car updates fall into the upgrade or downgrade category. For some teams like McLaren, Mercedes, and Haas, each new iteration appears to be delivering the steps hoped to help push them forward. For others, like Aston Martin, RB, and Ferrari, new parts have led to some unintended consequences and left them not only facing competitive challenges, but an urgency to get to the bottom of what has gone wrong. In Ferrari's case, its issue appears to revolve around a new floor that arrived as part of a Spanish Grand Prix upgrade. While the new parts delivered more downforce, especially in the low-speed corners, one consequence was it helped trigger the return of bouncing in fast turns, something which has hampered the squad in recent races. At last weekend's British Grand Prix, Ferrari conducted a floor comparison across both cars to work out which solution was best, and in the end opted to roll back its floor to the Imola spec. While that move proved best for the short term in giving Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc the best hope for the Silverstone weekend, moving forward the team clearly needs a more permanent solution. But more critical than that is in getting an understanding of why what has been delivered to the track is not what was expected, because until it has that answer, then it cannot hope to make any more progress. As Mercedes technical director James Allison talked about earlier in the year, if an upgrade proves to be a downgrade, then the consequences can be huge. That makes life hard because the moment you stop trusting your tools, you have to backtrack and you lose loads of time, said Allison. Time is your biggest friend, losing it your worst enemy. It is a situation not lost on Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur, but there is no sense that he fears the Maranello squad cannot turn things around to get back in the fight at the front. That confidence is based on the fact that 12 months ago, Ferrari appeared to be going through an exact same scenario, where updates were not delivering all that had been hoped for, and the team needed some understanding of what had gone wrong. The breakthrough came at the Dutch Grand Prix when Ferrari elected to sacrifice its weekend preparations in favor of what was effectively a single-day test to focus entirely on car experiments. It is why he thinks the call to split floors across the cars at Silverstone, even if it meant a potential hit to hopes for the British GP, was the right thing to do to kickstart its understanding of what was going on. I think we had exactly the same situation last year, almost at the same stage of the season. Silverstone, Budapest, and Spa, he said. We stopped it at Zandvoort, had a good scan of the situation, and had a good recovery because the weeks after we were there. What is tough in this situation is you don't have tests, proper tests, to fix it, or to at least understand it. It is very difficult as a team to compromise or sacrifice Friday sessions when you know you are losing time during the weekend and say, okay, let's forget about FP1, FP2, and focus on the midterm. Trust me, this decision as a team is difficult because you start the weekend, and it was even worse at Silverstone with the weather, and it means you put yourself in a tough situation. But this we knew before, but it was even worse that Saturday morning was with wet tires, but it is like it is. We assumed the decision before the weekend, and I think it was the right call to do it. While the floor data from Silverstone's practice running pointed to the new version being taken off the car for the remainder of the weekend, Vasseur says a decision will be taken in the next few days about what the squad will do for the next race in Hungary. The focus before making that call is in trying to get to the bottom of why things have happened. Asked about the trigger for the problems, Vasseur said it was not known right now. Correlation is okay, the correlation on the downforce is okay, he said. It is still a question mark for everybody, and sometimes the bouncing is popping up like this. It is quite difficult to have correlation because you don't have bouncing in the wind tunnel. We all have metrics, and you cannot anticipate you have more bouncing with this part over another one. But to know if it will have a negative impact on performance is another story. Looking ahead, Vasseur does not believe that Ferrari will be impacted for long. And while it may require another race of seeking answers, he thinks it is simply a matter of producing new parts that eradicate the bouncing. Asked if issues were an inherent problem with the SF24, or just related to the updates, Vasseur said, "We changed all the aero parts and the bouncing appeared in Spain. To fix it, you have tons of solutions. You have solutions with a compromise on performance. You have solutions without a compromise on performance, which is developing a new package. I think we are there now. We will have to have the next race with the current car, but the sooner the better we will bring upgrades that have less bouncing." While the floor issues have put Ferrari in a tricky spot for the last few races and prompted questions over potential downgrades, Vasseur is sure the situation is not one to be too alarmed by. He says history shows that Ferrari has had a good grip on bringing improvements to its car, so there is no need to panic that it has a one-off headache. "I can't speak about 2021 or 2020, but over the last 16 months, all the upgrades that we have brought have had very good correlation with what we did in the wind tunnel," he said. It has been one of the assets of the team last year, to bring small upgrades, and each time, it was paying off. This one we had an issue, but it is not that we have an issue that it is the end of the world. Fernando Alonso believes a double points finish at the British Grand Prix was a step back to normality for Aston Martin after a difficult run of results in Formula One. The British squad had scored points in each of the first 6 rounds of the championship, but a comprehensive upgrade introduced for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix made the AMR24 more difficult to drive. As a result, Aston Martin only managed to score in 2 of the next 5 races, albeit with a double points finish in Canada amid variable conditions. Although the 7th and 8th places that the team scored mere meters down the road from its Silverstone base also came in a rain-affected race, its performance throughout the weekend suggested that the team had been assisted by a pair of upgrades. The team had introduced a new front wing at Silverstone and reworked the aerodynamics around its rear brake ducts, which prompted Alonso, who finished 8th, to suggest that the team had moved towards its pre-Imola position. "It was pretty good, the feeling was back to normality," Alonso said. "We were the 5th, 6th fastest team. Nico, Hulkenberg I think was very fast the whole weekend, but we could fight for points. 7th and 8th, I think it's more or less the positions we were in pre-Imola. We came back to our more natural position, so I'm happy for that. It has been better. After Austria, we regrouped a little bit. We understood a couple of directions that maybe were not right. As I said, we're happy to be back in the points. It felt more competitive." With new upgrades planned for the next 2 races in Hungary and Belgium, Alonso hoped that the team could show a similar trajectory to Mercedes this year or McLaren in 2023 and make a concerted step towards the top 4 teams. He warned that the team needed to prove that it could make those improvements and not to promise too much with them in case they issued similar problems to the Imola package. "We need to prove it. We need to not talk and deliver the results," the Spaniard added. "We've been bringing in a lot of new parts to the car, and some of them they work, some of them they didn't. Hopefully in Hungary we have a positive surprise." Team principal Mike Crack was careful not to draw too many conclusions from the race result, noting the clear discrepancy between the warm Austria temperatures and the wet, cool conditions at Silverstone. He noted that the team needed to enhance its understanding from the data and not just dine out on a successful Grand Prix. "We need to first analyze because it was also not a normal race with the wet in between. We need to have a look. The ranking is better than the previous 2, we don't have to be blind to see that, but we have to analyze if the performance is better. We need to see what is the effect of the new parts and then decide how we move on. I think we need to be careful comparing these races. We were in Austria, it was 50-60 degree track temperature, the softest tires on the track, that has either very high speed or very low speed corners. You come to Silverstone, it's very cold, you have the hardest tires, so I think these are the effects that you have to isolate and separate. Not that you get lost into just being driven by the ranking and the position." Thanks for watching the video, I'll see you in the next one.